Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be kind of a different video, as you can obviously tell by the title. So if you're here just for like the usual content where I talk about makeup or how I'm doing, like going through all my eyeshadows and panning and stuff like that, like this is probably not the video for you. You might want to click off. But I'm in my comfiest poncho. Remember ponchos? Am I right? Like, I love them. I love them. They're so comfortable. My husband, not a fan. I remember when I bought a couple of ponchos, this one and like another one, and the first time I wore it, Jeff was like, "Looks like you're wearing a carpet. Like you just cut a hole in a carpet and then just put it over you." And I'm like, "Thanks, babe." But anyway, yeah, if you're seeing this video, then obviously I decided to go ahead and post it. I hate to sound cliche because I know everybody says this in their videos, like, I didn't think I was ever going to make this video and stuff. And I always laugh when people say that because it's like, sure. But now I'm in a situation where that's actually true. And that's why I don't know, I'm very nervous about posting this. It's pretty much like it's like one of the things that I talk about to nobody in my real life. Very few people know, actually almost, I don't know if anybody knows like the full, other than like my parents know like the full extent of the story. And I'm not even going to share the full extent of the story with you guys because some things are just not for the public. So I've thought it through and I know what I want to share and what I don't want to share, and you guys are just going to have to be cool with that. But as you can tell by the title, whatever I decide to make the title, I'm sure it'll be relevant. I'm just going to talk about my experiences over the past few years that have led to today and to identifying that I have a problem with alcohol. I still find it hard to say I'm an alcoholic. You probably heard me stutter just there and started to say it and then said I have a problem with alcohol. So it's one of those things where it's still, even though I've been sober now for over a year, I still like feel a certain way about identifying myself as an alcoholic because there is a stigma, and it's not something I ever thought I would be. I mean, it's so weird to now have to acknowledge that and like absorb that and make that part of my identity. And it isn't really like part of my identity. I mean, that's kind of like misleading to say that. I don't consider it like my identity at all. But it is something that I think a lot of people out there can relate to the struggle, and so I want to tell my story about it, and then maybe you guys can relate. So let's go back to the beginning, I guess. So when I was in high school, a lot of people, like starting really early, like honestly, okay, let's go back to middle school for a second. When I was in middle school, there were, for the most part, like it was pretty normal, and most people were pretty normal, like 11 and 12-year-olds or whatever. Like nobody was into drugs and alcohol at that point, except there were a couple. And that's where I want to start off, just by saying like I did have a couple of, I wouldn't even call them like friends. They weren't really in my friend group. They were just like acquaintances, I guess. But I did have some acquaintances that were kind of in the peripheries of my friend group in middle school that were already doing not abusing, but partaking in recreational drugs, like smoking pot and drinking on occasion. So that was like the first like time I'd really known anyone personally that was my age that really like partook in things like that. And it didn't interest me at all. I was not down. I was like, wow, you're stupid. And I'm I'm so not interested in that. And then I went to high school, and by high school, like that's when everyone really like jumped on the bandwagon with drinking. Um, Grade 9 through 12, in varying degrees, like, you know, everyone kind of like at some point during those 4 years started drinking. And for the first like little bit of high school, I was still like so not down. Like I didn't care when other people drank, but I was not interested. I didn't drink. I was like afraid. I was afraid of like drinking, overdoing it. I was afraid of being hungover. I was afraid of puking and like just having the worst time. So I didn't really drink. I definitely didn't do drugs. I didn't even try smoking weed at all in high school. But near like sort of near the end of high school, I guess it was like grade 11 or 12. Mm, I want to say 12, somewhere in there. Anyways, I think 17. I was definitely, yeah, I'm going to say I was 17, was when I first tried drinking. And the first time I drank was interesting because it was with my boyfriend at the time. Uh, and he was like a bigger guy. Like I was really small in high school. Like I was really, really thin. I'm short. So like I only weighed like about 95 to 100 pounds. And my boyfriend was like a bigger dude. Like he was like 6 feet tall. Like he was heavier. So like he could drink a lot more and not really like feel the effects of the alcohol. And he'd also already had, you know, been drinking longer, like multiple times before I had ever tried it. And so the first time I drank, I was with my boyfriend at the time and his friend, and he made me like a mixed drink, and it was Canadian Club whiskey with ginger ale. And now that I'm an adult, I understand that when you make drinks, you put like an ounce of alcohol and then the rest with like the soda or whatever it is. But I was young and I didn't know anything about drinking, and my boyfriend literally made it like half and half. Like half and half, like half whiskey, and it was like a solo cup, right? So like half whiskey and half ginger ale. So it was a pretty strong drink, and I'd never drank before in my life. So I drank that and was hammered, like right away hammered. Like I was hammered. And so we decided to go and, you know, wander around town. We were walking around town. I was shit-faced drunk. We went to my work. Why I did that, I have no idea. But I worked in like a Tim Hortons in town, and we went to my work, and I was obviously noticeably drunk because I went up and ordered like my donut or whatever it was I ordered. I think we went there on purpose to like get me some food because like I was drunk, so I was trying to like sober up, I guess. And we went in there, and like my coworker, which was like an older lady, she was the one who took my order, and she was like, someone's having a good night, and like kind of made like jokes about how drunk I was. And then guess who shows up in the Tim Hortons? But my sister, okay, my younger sister. So I'd never drank before, and she had never obviously seen me drunk before because I'd never drank before. I'd never been drunk before. And she right away knew something was up. She talked to my boyfriend and his friend and was like, you need to get her the fuck out of here because my parents are coming to pick me up. So my parents were on their way, and obviously I was not allowed to drink at age 17. So we got the hell out of there, and it was a lot of crying and falling over, and it was just an interesting experience the first time I drank. And after that, I was just kind of like, well, that was fun. I mean, whatever, I tried it. And it was fun, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I didn't have like a bad experience with it, so kind of made me more interested in trying it again. And so over the next like few months, so like this is still, I guess, grade 12 of high school, like my senior year of high school. I didn't go to like parties in high school or anything like that, but like I remember like prom, for example, like there was like an after party at prom, and like that was an occasion when I drank. And so there were like occasions here and there when I would drink in high school, but it wasn't like crazy out of control. And there were a lot of other kids in my high school that drank like every weekend, and they would show up to school dances like drunk before the dance even started and stuff like that. So like those are the kind of people that I always thought were like the stereotypical like gonna be an alcoholic types, which is ironic. But then my skin is so dry, it's like so itchy, sorry guys. So then after that I went to college, and college just has such, anybody who has been to college can probably attest to this, has such a heavy drinking culture. Like everything's about drinking in college. Every weekend, not even just weekends, like there's somewhere to go, there's some kind of party or nightclub or whatever where you can go and there's always people willing to go with you to like go and get drunk literally any night of the week. So that made it more available to me, but also I felt like I was the only one, like I didn't know anybody else at my college. Nobody from my high school went to the same college as me. I was like the only one who went there from my graduating class. So I had no friends at this school. I was like a complete noob. I guess everybody kind of feels that way though, freshman year of college, like nobody knows anybody. So we're all kind of collectively like in the same boat. We're kind of like trying to make friends and trying to get to know people and stuff. And it's always easier. It feels like it's always easier with alcohol. And that is something that I feel like maybe was one of the first warning signs I should have recognized, which was that I wasn't really drinking for fun. Like I was drinking for fun, but like I wasn't drinking because I wanted to drink. I wasn't drinking because I enjoyed the flavor. I wasn't drinking for those reasons. I was drinking because I was a very, very shy person. And I felt like if I didn't have some alcohol, I would just be the girl sitting in the corner not talking to anybody, because that's always what I was in high school. I was a girl and sitting in class that never talked to anybody. And it just really didn't work well for me in high school, and I just didn't want to be that person anymore. And college was like a fresh start, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna just drink so that I feel like I can talk to people, and like, you know, it was like definitely what they call a social lubricant for me, but I took that to the next level. I felt like I needed it to talk to people. I felt like without it, I was just cripplingly shy. So that led to me drinking more and more and more, and still at this point I would not consider it a problem. I had at this point never even drank enough to like puke like the night of. I got some pretty bad hangovers, and like in the first few years of college, like I'd wake up and be puking and stuff the next day. But I felt like, okay, well whatever, I'm in college, that's normal. Like, and then as college went on, like by like my maybe I think it was my third year of college, is when the drinking got really bad, to the point where I was drinking so much that was the first time like I blacked out. And I was like puking the night of drinking, and you know you've drank a lot when you're puking the night of. So there was like an incident in college. It was my 20th birthday, and I invited a bunch of friends over. I was having like a party or whatever for my 20th birthday, and by the time, like I had a few friends arrived a little bit earlier than the others. So we were like, all right, let's get this party started. And we started drinking. And one of my friends at the time thought like it would be funny or fun to just like do a bunch of shots. And I was like all about it. I was like, all right, sure. And I ended up doing like, at this time, don't forget, I'm still like 90 pounds, like 100 pounds. So like that, you don't have, when you're that small, you don't need a lot of alcohol to get super drunk. And my friend and I shouldn't say anything to do with my friend, because really I was the one who made the decision to like do it. Just because she encouraged it doesn't make it her responsibility. It was still my responsibility. But I ended up doing like 8 or 9 shots of straight liquor, like rum, within like half an hour, like a half an hour span. And so that's when I blacked out. I was shit-faced, and my guests hadn't even arrived yet for this like party I was having. So the whole thing like just was like a nightmare. It it was a literal nightmare. Like, I was in the bathroom throwing up the entire time. My friends, a couple of my friends were like really worried about me because I was literally throwing up like every like 3 minutes. I would be like throwing up again, and I was like so drunk that like I was like smashing my face off the back of the toilet as I'm throwing up because I didn't even have the spatial awareness of like where the tank of the toilet was. So I would just like lean over to puke and like smash my face off the back of the toilet, and I was falling over, and it was a shit show. It was truly a shit show, and it got so bad. Like, obviously all the people that I invited over to hang out with just kind of left because they were like, well, this isn't happening. A couple of my like good friends stayed with me because they were like concerned, and I ended up going to the hospital that night because my friend was quite concerned about me, and so she wasn't sure. Like, it had been hours of me throwing up at this point, like so much so that I had nothing left to throw up, you guys. I was just dry heaving at this point, and it was not stopping. And so my friend took me to the hospital, and they kept me there for a little bit. They were monitoring me. They took like some blood tests to make sure my blood alcohol level was like not gonna like kill me and stuff. And I didn't have to get my stomach pumped or anything like that because I'd been vomiting so much. There was like nothing left to like pump out of my stomach. I was more or less getting it out of my system, and anything that was still that was in my system was already in my bloodstream. Like, it wasn't something they could like pump out at that point. But I was throwing up so much that like I started throwing up like bile, and it was like black. Like, if you've ever been that drunk that you're throwing up black sludge, that's a thing, guys. That's a thing. So that was a really bad night. That was a really, really bad night. I was hungover after that night for like, I swear it was like 36 hours of being hungover after that. It was horrible. But of course I didn't learn my lesson then. So that was when I was like 20, right? Still don't have an alcohol problem at this point, in my opinion. It was just like a bad incident. And everybody who's been to college has had a bad incident, you know what I mean? Like, everybody's overdone it like once or twice. So that's kind of how I justified it to myself. I was like, okay, well, oops, like I fucked up or whatever that one night. But now I know for next time. And things just kept like chugging along the same way. But at this point, I had slowly started working into my routine, just like having a drink on like a more regular basis. And this is kind of around the time when I started drinking by myself. And people always say that that's like a warning sign, but I always thought like I'm not one of those people. I'm not drinking alone because I am like an alcoholic. I just like to drink or whatever. That's kind of what I said. So around like the very last year of college, I was like basically I didn't like going to parties anymore. I would just like, I never really liked going to parties, to be honest with you. So I just kind of, but I liked the feeling of being drunk. So I thought, how can I still have the feeling of being drunk without going to a party? Oh, that's easy. I'll just get drunk at home alone. So that's what I would do. And so it was like the last year of college. I would lock myself in my room. I shared an apartment with some other girls, but I don't think were really aware because I would just go into my room alone and just drink by myself and then go to bed. And it was quite sad. Looking back, it's like quite depressing to think about, but that's what I did. And that was kind of like going forward, kind of like a routine for me. I was kind of over the party scene. Like I said, I never really enjoyed it anyways. I felt like I never really met anybody. Like remember going back to the beginning of college when I said the whole reason I started doing all this was because I felt like I wanted to meet people and make friends, and I needed alcohol to be able to talk to them. And after 4 years of doing that, I felt like it hadn't paid off because I didn't really make any friends, because the kind of people you meet when you're just like shit-faced at a party are not gonna like be your long-term friends. So I just kind of felt like it was a waste of time. I don't really have any friends from college because the whole time I had drinking buddies in college. I didn't really have any close friends. I had some people in my program that I still kind of chat with, like, so they're kind of like my friends, but I never made any like really close friends in college. And at this point, college is basically over, and it was my last year of college. It was my last year of college at this point, and I ended up with this roommate. This is going to be a whole nother video because I can't get into everything that went down with this one roommate that I had. But let me just sum it up with, I had literal Satan as a roommate. Like, it was the worst person. Like, she was the worst roommate, and we had such beef with each other. Like, it was the worst thing. Like, it was the worst thing having to live with somebody that you actually, like, actively despise. And same for her to me. Like, it was not one-sided. She fucking hated my guts. I hated her guts. Like, thank God we lived on opposite sides of the apartment, because I probably would have fucking killed her. Like, I hated this bitch. And so that kind of, like, constantly living in animosity and constantly living, like, I, like, didn't even want to go outside of my room to go into the kitchen and make dinner, because I didn't want to, like, have to even see her face walk by me in the common areas of the apartment. I was just so unhappy living with her. For a time, I had a boyfriend at the time that I was dating, and I swear for like this was like the last year of university for me, and the last like maybe 2 months of that year until she moved out, I pretty much moved in with my boyfriend. And not because we were like wanted to move in together. It was because I could not even stand to go home. Like, I absolutely just hated even being in my own house. Like, it got so bad. And I could do another story on that if you guys really want to know why this girl was so awful. I'd be happy to spill the tea on that, because she deserves it. Like, I'm not going to ever, like, out her and say her name or anything, but, like, I can tell you what went down, and it was not pretty. So I feel like that contributed to me drinking even more, just because I was so, like, whenever I was at home, I was like, fuck my life. Like, I don't want to be here. This is horrible. And so, yeah, the drinking escalated, like always. And then, like, at this point, it was at the point where I would go home to visit my parents and stuff, and I would drink at their place. Like, I would just always be, it was just like a regular part of my life now at this point. And it was not as a social lubricant anymore. It was not so that I wouldn't be shy around strangers, because I wasn't meeting strangers. I was drinking with myself, like, alone by myself. So fast forward a couple years, like, I was still drinking throughout. It was kind of the same. But back in about 2017, 2018 is when it really got to be problematic. That is when, so I'm now at this point married, and my husband, Jeff, he doesn't really drink. Like, he'll have like a beer once in a while, but he doesn't, a lot of times, like, he'll just pass on it. Even if his friends are having a beer and stuff, like, he'll just be like, nah. Because he just isn't interested. He doesn't like feeling like hungover the next day, and he's like, it's not worth it. Like, I don't really want to. So at this point, my drinking, when you are dependent on alcohol to a certain extent, you want other people around you to drink too, because it makes you feel normal. It makes you feel like this behavior is not problematic because everyone else is doing it. So I know there were many times when I would crack open a beer and be like, Jeff, have a beer with me. And he wouldn't. And I would be like, why don't you ever want to have a beer with me? And I would like get annoyed with him and be like, you always have a beer when you're with your friend and stuff. And he's like, well, no, I don't, first of all. And if I do, it's because that's like an occasion to drink. Like, we're just sitting here watching TV. I don't need to drink right now. Like, I just don't need to drink right now. And so that would, at the time, that would piss me off, because I'd be like, fine, I'll drink alone. And I guess deep down, like, at the time I didn't realize why I wanted him to drink with me so badly. But now looking back, I kind of get it. Like, I was trying to make myself feel like what I was doing was okay. And then I started to drink. Like I said, drinking alone was a regular thing for me. I would sit on, Facebook or whatever, get hammered, start writing mean comments to people, like, just start, like, stirring shit on the internet. And then when people would be, like, would clap back at me, I'd just get angry, and then when I was angry, I would drink more, and it was just like a cycle. And it got to the point where this is like the first warning sign I actually recognized and what caused me to rethink my drinking behavior, because this I could tell wasn't normal. And that is the fact that when I drank, I would have like the intention of having like one drink. Like I would pull out like one cooler or one or two, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, I'm just gonna have one or two. I'm just gonna have one or two. And it was never one or two, because as soon as I started drinking, I couldn't stop. I could not stop. Like I would have one or two, and then I just had to have more, and I just had to have more, and it just kept going and kept going and kept going until I lost track, until I blacked out. And there was a time in like 2018, last year, or 2 years ago almost at this point, when I opened a bottle of wine, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna have a glass of wine. And that's the last thing I really remember. And then I woke up the next day, obviously feeling like garbage, like super hungover. And I was like, holy fuck, like what did I do? And I go downstairs, and like sitting on this counter, this kitchen island right behind me, was the bottle of wine that I opened, completely empty, and another bottle of wine that was like down to like this much in the bottom. So I'd finished like almost 2 full bottles of wine to myself alone. That's a problem. And I didn't remember it. I didn't remember doing it. And that happened multiple times. That was just one specific example, but this type of thing happened a lot. And it happened especially a lot when Jeff works shift work, so sometimes he works at night, and I felt like when he was at work at night, like for a night shift, I felt like I definitely drank more during those times, because I knew he wouldn't question it. I knew, because he wasn't home. So I knew he wouldn't like judge me for drinking. I knew he wouldn't ask why I was drinking. I knew he wouldn't even know about it. And honestly, it was like almost part of me was like trying to hide it, trying to hide the amount that I was drinking. So again, another warning sign that it's becoming a problem. And there were, at this point, I just got hired at like sort of a newer job. And there were days that I had to go in after a night of drinking and try and not throw up, because I was so hungover. And like, so it was sort of slowly starting to affect my work. I didn't really let it get that far, thank God, because that would have been horrible for like my career. And that was the one thing I felt, it almost like justified it to me, because I felt like, well, it's not like I'm letting it affect my work. It's not like I'm letting it affect my life. So like, obviously it's under control. But I was, I guess what you would call like more of a higher functioning like alcoholic, because I knew when it was like I could decide not to drink because I knew I had to work. But then as soon as I had one drink, it was over. So like there were a couple times when I made that mistake where I was like, oh, I'll just have one, and then it was fucking over. And then the times when I knew I didn't have to work the next day, that was a shit show from the get-go, because I already knew I didn't have to work, so fuck it, I guess I'm getting hammered. And oh yeah, so it reached kind of a breaking point at the end of 2018, and I'm not going to go into details about exactly what happened that really made me decide like no more of this, but it was affecting my relationship. It just started to really have an impact on my life, and in particular on like the most important thing in my life, which is my husband. And he was getting fed up with it. He didn't, I'm not, like I said, I don't like to go into relationship information publicly, because that's our business, like it's our marriage, and I'm not gonna like go into details about my marriage on the internet. But point is, my marriage was suffering because of my drinking. And when I really started to feel like I might be losing my grip on things, and when I thought maybe my marriage was potentially headed towards a bad place, and like could be in serious jeopardy, then that's kind of when I was like, this needs to stop. So that's kind of when I started going to some AA meetings, and I quit cold turkey. I quit cold turkey drinking. I was in such a rough place though at the end of 2018. It was so bad that I went to go stay at my parents for a couple of days, just to kind of like process everything. And at this point I was so overwhelmed by how much damage this had already done to my life, and I was still in a good place, relatively speaking, compared to some people who really let it ruin their life. But I was still like at a point where I could turn the ship around, thank God. But I didn't really see the optimistic side at this point that it could be saved, and I kind of felt like, oh my God, I've ruined my life. I clearly remember I texted my mom one day after waking up from another blackout, and I literally, pretty sure I texted her. It might have even been in the middle of the night, like I don't know when it was, what hour of the day it was, but I texted her after another bender and said, I think I just ruined my life. Like straight up, because of my drinking. Like I think my life is over. I think like my marriage could potentially be over, my entire everything I've set up for myself here, like my little life that I've cobbled together is just effectively over because of my own problem. And thank God I was wrong about that. But my mom came and picked me up, and I went to her and my dad's house for a bit, and just like it was like the worst. It was literally probably the worst couple of days of my entire life. Like it was so bad. I was just bawling my eyes out for days. Like I like didn't even eat. I was just like, it was so rough, and it was so rough. And like, so yeah, that was like the rock bottom I had to hit before I changed. And it wasn't easy. Like I came home a couple days later from my parents' house because I couldn't just up and leave my life. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I felt like I was trying to do. And my parents even acknowledged that, and they were like, you need to go back to your life, because you can come here and, you know, recuperate with us for a couple of days, but like you can't be running away. Like, and if this is you trying to be running away, like, no, we're not enabling you to run away from the problems that you've made for yourself. You have to go and fucking clean up your own shit. Like, you made your bed, now go and deal with it. So I came home, and the very first thing I did when I walked in the door was I went to my alcohol cupboard and I poured everything down the drain. And I have not drank at all since then. It's almost been 13 months now, so it's been a year and a little bit. And I'm still like highly motivated to continue, but that's not to say that there aren't times when it's tempting. As somebody who works in the weddings and events, like, is what I do for a living. So I'm at weddings all the time and events all the time. And what do they have at weddings and events? Alcohol. And a lot of times free alcohol, because it's usually open bar and things like that. But I just, and it's just, I don't want to paint a picture of like life after going sober and how it's so easy now and I don't even want it anymore and stuff. And that is not true. I'm just choosing to be smarter about it and to force myself to remember that horrible time, and then decide not to have a drink, because there are definitely times when I still want it. And there's one thing that started happening when I started feeling like it was getting out of control, and that still happens to me today, which is that seeing alcohol and stuff, even on TV, like when people drink on TV or in YouTube videos, when people are doing these, like, let me chat and drink wine and stuff, that triggers me. Like, legitimately, like, triggers me to want to drink when I see other people drinking, even if it's on like a fictional show, like even on just like a sitcom, if people are drinking, like seeing people drinking and seeing alcohol being consumed in any sort of way, shape, or form very much makes me tempted. It's, I'm just being real with you guys. It does. But I just have to, if it gets really overwhelming, I have to just click off the video I'm watching if it's like too much, or turn off the TV or whatever. And it's getting easier. The longer I'm sober, the easier it is to just see it and not feel compelled to turn it off. But I do still want to drink. And I think that's something that's probably going to take a long time to go away, if ever. So I don't know if it ever will. So I'm just trying to be real with you guys about the truth of alcoholism, and if you are in a place where you are acknowledging that you have a bit of a problem and you want to sort of change, and you're thinking that maybe at the end of the line you're not even going to want it anymore, I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation for you by saying that that's realistic. At least in my personal experience, that's not realistic. But I mean, maybe some people get to that point. I'm not sure. Just for me, maybe I will get there one day. I'm not there yet, because I'm only a year in. But so that's kind of my substance abuse story for you. And a lot of people that hear this story, or at least hear that, I don't usually, this is the first time I'm ever telling the full story, really. But if I just mention to somebody that I don't drink because I'm a recovering alcoholic, they seem like a little bit surprised. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't really think of you as like that kind of a person. And I'm like, well, I mean, I never say this. I just go, oh, yeah, well. But in my head, I'm thinking like, well, what kind of a person do you think of when you think of an alcoholic? Because obviously there's some kind of a stereotype in mind, and I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm not like a homeless bum who's just begging for money on the street corner so that he can spend his last dollar on a bottle of booze and drinking it out of an LCBO bag or something. If that's what you're envisioning, no, that's not what most alcoholics look like. And not all alcoholics are big time partiers. Like, I was the type of, like, maybe people are saying that because they're like, oh, well, you don't really like party and go to raves and go to clubs and bars and stuff. And that's another, I feel like, inaccurate stereotype, because, like, yeah, I was not the bar hopping type of alcoholic. I was the sit at home and write mean comments on Facebook type. Like, I was the hermit alcoholic, okay? So there's no real, like, perfect example of this is what an alcoholic looks like, because it can be old people, it can be young people, it can be extroverts, it can be introverts, it can be people that go out and party all the time, it can be people that sit at home alone and get drunk by themselves. It's all over the map, you guys. So so that's my story. If any of you out there feel like you can relate to anything I've said in this video, please, I'm begging you, for the sake of yourself, comment below or reach out to me privately. If you need anybody just to talk to, if you need resources, I can give you as much information as I can to help you guys towards recovery, because you don't want to wait until your life is completely ruined before you get things under control. And unfortunately, a lot of people need to reach that point before they acknowledge the problem. But I'm just telling you, if anything I said rings true to you, then you need to really look deep in yourself and think about if it's a problem for real, and stop making excuses for yourself and just be realistic and be honest with yourself. If you can't have just one drink without feeling like you need to have more, and you have to keep going and you have to keep going and you can't stop, think about what that means, okay? Just really, really seriously. And if you see people drinking on TV shows or in YouTube videos, and as soon as you see it, you're like, oh, I gotta grab a beer, and you go and get one out of the fridge, like right as soon as you see it, because it just like makes you want it instantly, I don't know. Just give it some thought. Like I said, if anything sounds familiar, if you're sitting here going, "Oh yeah, that's me." Um, there's more of us out there than you think, and they're not all a bunch of like middle-aged men who are just like I don't know. There was like it's not the stereotype that you think it is. And I promise you, if you do reach out to me privately or in the comment section about this, I will respond to you. Unless for some reason I don't see it, but like I will not read your comment and ignore you. I promise you that. So hopefully this video helps someone. That's the only reason I'm really doing this, is because I don't want to see somebody else ruin their life. I just really, really do not. And yeah, so that's all I have to say on that, guys. This is probably the only time I'll really talk about it, because I don't like talking about it. I get embarrassed talking about it. I feel ashamed talking about it. I feel vulnerable talking about it. And I know there's a lot of people, because of all the bad stuff I did during my drinking years, I know I have a lot of people out there who aren't big fans of me. So, like, I got a lot of enemies, you could say. So I know there's going to be people that watch this video and just, like, have a good laugh at, like, my situation. But I think it's worth it to put myself out there, even if it means getting, like, shit talked behind my back and stuff. If it means I can help somebody, then I guess it's worth it. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.